Hello, everybody, and thanks for showing up. So within CogX's The Future of Industry section, this panel will look at the fashion industry in particular. It is one of the industries that is cited as causing significant damage to the planet. Most recent data shows 1.8% of global greenhouse emissions come from the fashion industry, and other data shows significantly more. But despite some attempts at regulatory protection, it continues to spiral. In our session today, we will explore the extent of the problem and potential solutions. So, I would like to introduce our panelists. We have Veronica Chou, an active investor in solutions that solve our climate crisis. We have Krishna Nikhil, CEO of purpose-led premium apparel brand Pangaia. And we also have Ozwald Boateng, founder and creative director of his world-renowned namesake label, and Maria Raga Francis, former CEO of the circular fashion marketplace Depop. So, before we jump into the solutions, I would love to hear from the experts in the terms of the fundamental nature and scale of this problem. What do you think are the key things that the industry needs to address today in terms of making a cleaner and more sustainable fashion industry? So I'd like to start with you, Veronica.
Oh, in the fashion industry, I think the key things are in every single step. We do have to figure out how to be more sustainable. And I think it's starting from how we make things, how we dye the fabrics, and every single process we have, how we ship it to customers, and how we deal with the products afterwards. So it's a big problem.
Krishna?
Well, you said it off the top. The scope of the problem is almost incomprehensibly large. I think you said 1.8%. I go by McKinsey's number, which says fashion is responsible for 4% of global emissions.
Yep.
And when you look at global wastewater, it's more like 20%. And the problem is that so much of the emissions are linked to fashion supply chain. That's what makes this problem so intractable. We can tell consumers to purchase less.
Yep.
We can tell them to buy used, but until we address the problems that are embedded in the supply chain, we won't have true transformation.
Yeah, no, it's true. It's very much our problem. Oswald?
I'm in agreement with what they're saying. I think the nature of the business is also based on huge amounts of stock. And so that's a huge consumption aspect to the business. And so I think there's something to be done with also the end consumer and developing a system where they're more patient to wait for what they have. So it means I don't have to make 20 different variables to fit that one person. So that would be my view.
Yeah, thank you.
Yeah,
Maria?
for me, just to build on that we know that there's 100 billion garments being produced on a yearly basis, and 100 million tons end up in landfills. So there's a huge waste issue. The challenge is that being sustainable is not as profitable as producing new stuff. And so until that flips, it's going to be very hard to change things. There are some big retailers, like we know Shein, that are producing on demand, producing small batches, seeing the demand, and then producing large amounts. That has the potential to reduce inventory stock from 30%, I think the industry has, to single digits. So things like that could potentially be solutions to a waste issue.
Yeah, no, thank you. And Krishna, to you, I wanted to ask, doing what you do, how can innovation in material science fundamentally change the industry?
Innovations in material science are here to break the cycle of fashion's impact on the planet. We do have this big dream where the product that we produce could actually be better for the planet than if it didn't exist. And technology is headed in that direction. The t-shirt I'm wearing is made from waste, banana and pineapple leaves, so agricultural waste. We have puffer jackets that are made with flowers instead of feathers. We've created sunglasses using carbon capture, sneakers that use grape waste from the winemaking industry. So all of this technology is out there. I think the issue is that the fashion industry as a whole has been incredibly slow to adopt these new technologies. And that is the big thing that we have to address is how do we get the fashion industry to move faster? How do we get consumers to also demand that change?
And just as a follow-on, why do you think it is? Why do you think it's taking us so long to actually adopt something that sounds fantastic and sounds so plausible and makes complete sense? Like, what is the resistance that you're facing?
I think these things are deeply embedded in the supply chain. We have an agricultural system that's built off extractive practices, not regenerative practices. We have a fashion supply chain that is fueled by petroleum-based cheap polyesters, as opposed to next generation textiles that biodegrade better and don't shed microplastics. No one's designing for circularity, they're designing for disposability. So we really have to confront these from their root cause.
Yes, yeah, a mindset shift. Maria, for you, following on from this, the key role of technology. What do you think are the crucial solutions that technology can provide, and how can technology guide responsible production?
Yeah, I was just thinking about what Krishna said about technology and why the fashion industry is slow to adapt technology. And one of the things that comes to my mind is that obviously fashion, it's a creative industry. Engineers naturally gravitate toward other types of industries. The good thing about this, though, is that we will probably see other technologies coming up in other industries before they come to fashion, which will allow us to see whether they work. Like I'm talking about like blockchain or metaverse or virtual reality, all those things that we've been talking for a while. We haven't seen them in fashion yet, but because probably they have to come in other industries first.
Yeah.
But I do think that we are in the verge of disruption, because if you think about what we're doing today, it's basically ideas of 2010 that we're just deploying at the moment with the penetration of mobile and social commerce, but it has not drastically changed. You see a lot of companies popping up. I think there's more chances that they come from small companies versus big companies, because big companies are very tough to change. So it would have to be from startups that do interesting things, and the bigger guys buy them. But I'm obviously very excited about everything that makes the second market more bigger in the entire category. Right now it's only 10% of the overall, so still small. But anything that makes the circular economy seamless. In the moment that you buy an item, you can automatically list it without having to take a photo, or the logistic part of it is still very time consuming for the consumer. So any technology that allows that process to be super easy, it would definitely reduce waste.
No.
Because you buy less new.
And do you think, just following on from that, in terms of technology and implementation, do you think it's a capital issue sometimes in terms of funding, in terms of for scalability?
It all comes down to whether the solution is effective and therefore reduces cost or makes money, right? If you have, Veronica can tell us a lot more because she's investing in these kind of businesses, but it all comes down to money at the end of the day. If you have a good idea that makes money, you will get a capital. Obviously, right now we're in the wrong part of the cycle, so getting capital in very innovative businesses or that are capital intensive is going to be tricky, but it's a matter of time. It will turn around again.
Thank you, Maria. And Veronica, to you on that, and doing what you do as an active investor in this space. What's your view on this? How do you think designers, let's say, can make better choices?
Yeah, I think, first of all, going back to your first question, which is, again, setting the stage, I grew up going to my family's factories where we had knitwear from making the yarn all the way to making the final garment, and also denim factories. And I'm the one who's there as a young girl holding my nose. Why is it so smelly? Why is it so dusty? Where is this blue water going? And, back then, no one really cared and they rolled their eyes at me, but these are the things that we're all tackling in our supply chain. And I think when people say, oh, how can we change the whole fashion industry? When I say all the many, many steps, first, of course, like any other industry, we need to find renewable energy sources, move away from using oil and gas, definitely not coal, and using renewable energy. And then it's the material side, which Pangaia does so amazingly well. And for me, equally, my pants are made from fermented sugar from agriculture waste. The shoes are recycled plastic bottles. My shirt is from regenerative agriculture silk. So in the process of making the shirt, we're actually capturing more carbon dioxide and putting it into the soil. So there's all these different ways. It's been a bit slow for brands to take on new technologies. One, because of cost. if the new technology is still at much higher price point at a green premium, unfortunately, customers are not going to adopt. Brands would maybe do a capsule collection, but it never goes to the main collection. But we need brands to take the first step, to take this risk, so that more people uses it, where then price points can come down. And then from there, another part is we will continue to make stuff. Of course, we push for all these resale rental business models, very much so. And my earrings are vintage. Usually I rent my handbag. There's so many options out there. But the other part is when we have big brands making things at a very low price point, then we still have a lot of stuff. And so I believe that we need to tackle the point of recycling. One of the companies I invested in, they started off as the world's first circular sneaker, where you can buy the sneaker when it's a white sneaker, so when it's old and done, you send it back to them, they can take it back for recycling. They've now transitioned to be a reverse logistics company, taking back clothing for brands like Uniqlo, J. Crew, and all that, so that they can take everything, sort it, and send to the suitable recyclers, which is great. But then the recycling technologies need to be further developed, because in fashion, there's clothes that are from the natural route, which is cotton. Ideally, we use organic or even regenerative. And there's the synthetic route, which is mainly polyester and nylon. But when we mix those two, it's very hard to separate it at the end of life. And so in that separation, there's many different companies that are developing chemical recycling that can make this natural and synthetic materials come off. But then it goes back to the design process of, hey, let's get designers thinking about how to make it easier for recycling. We made a puffer jacket a couple of years ago that was made from 330 recycled plastic bottles. I had a big argument with my team. They wanted metal buttons to make it more expensive looking and nicer. I was like, no, the buttons need to be same recycled PET that can be recycled again. So when we recycle, the whole thing goes into recycling. We don't need labor to cut off the buttons and then the labels and the hang tags. So in terms of design, I think there's a lot that needs to be thought about and think about, whether it's digital, using digital methods to reduce the amounts of samples in the design process, but it's really every single step along the way.
And no, thank you, Veronica. That's fantastic. And I think leads us quite nicely to Ozwald, really, because Ozwald, doing what you do by default, you're quite sustainable as being bespoke luxury men's tailoring. Do you want to explain more about your business model?
I don't have waste because I'm making to order, which is part of what I was saying before. If you know what the measurements are and you're making for the individual and you're making what they want, then there's no waste. And obviously there's a time frame, they've got to wait. So it could be anything from 8 to 12 weeks. And if you have that as a base, then we're in a wholly different game. I do really love what's been said in terms of all this new technology around being able to recycle, and that it needs to be made available to designers to make that decision. So if I'm buying natural fibers, I tend to. If I use this fabric, this is the footprint it's creating. And as long as I can be as creative within that, then there's no problem to do that at all.
Yeah. And on that then, if you can be informed on decisions that you're making, as a designer in-house, how do you think we can realistically help consumers out there make better choices when buying clothes and accessories?
I think, again, it's all about being willing to wait. I've always been looking at technology of, there's been all these interesting techniques, scanning the body, so we know what the exact measurements are. And sometimes I say, maybe I should go and speak to one of those tech companies and help them do it, because they seem to get the measurements wrong. But the idea is right. If you're able to somehow be able to get that information and forward that directly to a factory, and then the product get produced, and that meant waiting for 3 or 4 weeks, I think that could be a significant solution.
Can I jump in on that point? I think we also have to take the burden off the consumer from having to make these complex decisions. And even if it comes from this idea of, you can buy a jacket that's made from recycled plastic bottles. That sounds like a great idea. People have been doing it. I think as that topic is further studied, there's people who would argue that's not actually a good idea, that plastic bottles are part of a closed-loop recycling system. As soon as you take them out of that system and make a puffer jacket out of it, you've broken the closed loop of recycling. Plus, that jacket probably sheds microplastics when it's out and it's raining. And I think people have just been doing things that they think are right and has a little bit of a marketing story behind it so consumers buy it. I think one of our favorite ones was we saw swimwear made from ocean plastic.
Yeah.
So great, you take that plastic out of the ocean, you put it into a pair of swim trunks that then goes back into the ocean and sheds microplastics. And so we can't expect consumers to decode the science behind emissions, behind wastewater. There has to be some kind of standard that the fashion industry is moving towards. And I do think that's a place that is a little too open right now. Everyone has emission targets they want to reduce, but that's the only way we're going to get to the end point, is not just if consumers have to understand it and decode it themselves, but there are genuine standards across the industry.
No, I totally agree with you. And yeah, we've seen regulation. We don't need to fully go into that, but coming into play. But what is that? From your view, and I'll open this up to everyone else. What is that? How does that take force? Because your point there is about us as industry and industry experts leading by example there and informing on that point. But how does that ramp up? How does that come into play for consumers to be more informed? What is...
Yeah, look, I think science-based targets are a great starting point for that, and people have made commitments. I think most companies don't know how to achieve those commitments, because in order to do so, they're going to have to de-link emissions from growth, and no one has the solve for that other than a significant supply chain transformation, that there has to be greater pressure on all of the fashion companies to participate in that, not just commit to targets that they don't know how to achieve.
Yeah, no, fantastic. And then a question for everyone really is, and a key movement now around AI. How do we think AI can play an important role in the fashion industry in general? And Maria, if I could give that to you.
How do we think AI can transform the fashion industry?
Yes, yeah.
I mean, it's a big question, very broad. There is a lot of talk about it. Of course, this festival is all about AI. It's hard to specifically pinpoint one thing. It's across the entire chain. It's going to reduce a lot of. It's going to create a lot of efficiencies that would make things a lot more profitable and all that. But I think we have to wait and see. There are a couple of things that I'm actually quite interested to see what they come up. I'm sure you heard about the stable diffusion, which is basically once you take a photo, you write a text about something that you want to see, and then you actually see the picture of it. So as I was telling earlier, we're talking about production on demand. It can actually evolve into production on search. So whatever consumers are searching for, AI can actually produce it without actually producing the actual item. It's just a photo of it. So if everyone is searching for a red flower dress, retailers can actually start producing that because there's demand for it without even having the product and then producing on that. So it kind of gives you the extent of how far all of this can go. And ultimately, you can reduce waste because you don't produce things that are not even searched for.
Yeah. And Ozwald, if I could ask you from the same question, but from your position as a creative and as a designer that's has a point of view on design and society, and that's what the brands are, designer fashion's about. How can AI work with that and not hinder that creative process, I suppose?
No, I think it's an interesting tool. I think we're all figuring out what that means. I think it's going to be very interesting to sort of help you search for ideas, right? So maybe I have an idea on a particular textile design, and I feed it into the AI, and it brings me a series of solutions, and then I drill it down. I go, no, I don't want it to look like that. I want it to look more check, a bit more. I want the line to be angled like this, and it produces ideas. So I think in terms of maybe refining and efficiency, it could be very interesting. But, I've been asked this question about AI many times. How do I feel about it? And it's a tricky question, actually. Do I want my whole life to be one big algorithm? And do I want to have my emotional relationship with people, and my business is all about that emotional connection. And so I have been very, I would say, very conscious of what this AI world will look like, and how I integrate into my work is there needs to be always that personal connection, because I think we're drifting from it. But in terms of my back of house, sourcing maybe certain particular information in a very short space of time, then I think it's incredibly useful. But I'm not sure I want to put it front of house.
Yeah, very interesting. Thank you. And Veronica, to you.
So for AI, I'll give some concrete examples of some companies, again, all along the supply chain. So I've invested in a business that has AI sensors for the first step from yarn into making a fabric. Because those machines actually have mistakes, and sometimes you don't catch the mistakes until very late. Sometimes in fashion QC, quality control doesn't come until a very late stage. So adding a very simple AI-controlled sensor, which it can detect mistakes much earlier, has already reduced a lot of waste and also reduced a lot of cost. So this company out of Portugal called SmartTech has this. And then I also know of a company that does using AI to make zero waste design for their patterns, because when you make a garment, you need to design a pattern. The computer can help kind of match everything together like a puzzle so that there will be actually zero waste completely. And AI sometimes do that a little bit better than humans. In terms of recycling then, which I talked about earlier, there's companies that are using enzymes to recycle, to break down plastics of all different sorts. And every so often we see it in the newspaper, scientists find this enzyme that supposedly can eat plastic. In that enzyme discovery process, AI comes in very helpful because we can go through a lot more different microorganisms and enzymes to find the right one. So we see applications of AI in all the different parts slowly coming along.
Yeah. Fantastic. And Krishna, to you?
Yeah. Look, AI is already being used. Our last marketing campaign was done entirely through AI. And I think there's all these sources of hidden emissions. So people fly models and photographers to far-flung locations to get us to buy more stuff. That can be done entirely through AI.
Yeah.
There's also the ability to use AI in new material discovery. I think that one is the one that we find absolutely most promising. So I think we're at such a infancy stage of application of AI, but I do think it touches almost everything that we do over time.
Yeah, fantastic. Thank you. And then to kind of close, we have a big question for you all. In the next 10 years, what do you think are the crucial steps that businesses in fashion need to take? And Maria, if I could start with you.
Wow. I mean, after this discussion, implementing whatever kind of technology, whether it's AI or blockchain, whatever comes out to reduce waste, not for the sake of necessarily of, being sustainable, but it's actually better for the business. So it's better for the planet and better for the business. And doubling down on all these technologies that will help you to get there. And stay away of any sustainable initiative that you do from a greenwashing point of view. Make them because they are good for the business. And if they're good for the business, you don't need to convince consumers. You don't need to consume governments to establish, any kind of levies or whatever they decide to do. So, yeah, that would be my recommendation.
Thank you. Ozwald?
Wow.
Big
10
question.
years.
It goes by quickly.
Right. Yeah. That's a very complicated question, because I think there's probably one side of the world's got one view on it, and the other side of the world has another view on it. But ultimately, we got to do what's right for the planet, because we live in it, and we want it to continue. So I think we need to find solutions that are balanced and considered for the whole world, the whole planet, as opposed to maybe a few, because they're in an advantaged position. So there needs to be a real understanding of what all the needs are, and the solution has to be agreed that is fair.
Thank you. Krishna?
Yeah, building on the same point, I think the next 10 years have to be about transformational change within fashion's supply chain. And I think we have to remember that the planet is obviously at the forefront. It's incredibly important, but there are people's livelihoods who are attached to the fashion supply chain globally, and this transformation does need to be done justly and in an equitable manner. And really the three principles for me are adoption of innovative materials and processes, shift to regenerative agriculture from extractive practices, and designing for circularity from the outset.
On the offset. Yeah. Thank you. Thank you. Veronica?
I think the goal for everything in sustainability, and I don't know if we can reach it in 10 years, let's hope, let's try, is to move away from fossil fuels completely. On the energy side of using, now we have solar, wind, hopefully nuclear one day. I'm very bullish on that. But same with what Krishna was saying, with moving away from all sorts of plastic bottles or plastic or polyester or nylon and moving towards bio-based, which Pangaia is doing so well. But if more brands can do it, if more consumers can make those choices, and more brands can make it easier for the consumers to make choices, but completely move away from fossil fuels. And we can do it from natural ways.
Thank you. Thank you so much. Well, thank you to our round of panelists. So that was fantastic. I enjoyed that myself. Thank you.
Wonderful. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.